Emmanuel, do you agree with Benny that there is a colonial aspect, an apartheid-like aspect to the occupied West Bank?
No. Zionism is a national liberation movement that freed its land from Arab Muslim colonialism. How do you think Islam expanded itself from the Arab Peninsula to Indonesia, from Indonesia to Morocco? Not from the Holy Spirit. This was conquest and colonialism.
You may have noticed that there are many Jewish or even Israeli critics who go so overboard in their opposition to Israel that they just lose sight completely of the bigger picture in the Middle East. That's why it's very refreshing to see this clip here of Professor Benny Morris. I don't know if you know Benny Morris or not, but he was one of the new historians, as they were called, who dug through the archives of the Israeli state and uncovered a lot of the different things that happened in the 1948 war with the Arabs, including some stuff that weren't so flattering to Israel and for Israel's image. So he did a lot of great work as an honest historian, has been critical of Israel, but when Israel is accused of things that are simply not true, he is willing to defend the truth, as he did here on this panel of Al Jazeera.
We have Diana Boutou, who's a Palestinian lawyer in Israel, former advisor to the PLO. Emmanuel Navon is an international relations lecturer at Tel Aviv University. Daniel Levy is a former Israeli peace negotiator, president of the US Middle East Peace Project. Diana, I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about genocide, because we started the show talking about genocide. Benny very adamantly says it's absurd. There's many definitions. You're a lawyer. What do you make of that?
Look, Benny is exactly what I expect him to be, which is a genocide denier and a genocide apologist. Every human rights organization has been defining this as a genocide. We have the ICJ that has come out and said that there's plausible case for genocide, and yet we're to believe the Israelis, the only people who say that it isn't a genocide. Israel's allowed to be a colonizer, Israel's allowed to do what it pleases, and that Palestinians just have to sit by idly and take it. And this is the fundamental problem with Zionism. But we, Palestinians, are the ones who feel Zionism on our bodies. We've paid for it with our lives. We've paid for it with our land. This attempt to redefine Zionism will go nowhere, because you know, and the world knows, it's a
Hold on, I'm going to bring in all the panel.
It's a colonial
All right. Emmanuel, you teach international relations in Israel. Is there a recognition there that a lot of the world governments, allies of Israel, as well as the usual human rights groups, are very critical, at a minimum, of the way that Israel has prosecuted what's going on in Gaza?
Well, first of all, Diana said we're feeling Zionism. You're right, you're feeling it, because the only place in the Middle East where Arabs are free is Israel. And so the freedom that you have, Diana, is because the only country in the Middle East where there is freedom is the state of Israel, from which you benefit, and you should be thankful for it.
I'm not grateful at all.
Because the only country in the Middle East where Arabs can elect their officials, be elected, be judges at the Supreme Court, be president of a university, the only free country in the Middle East is Israel.
Dan, do you want to respond to that?
I find it staggering that the gentleman to my right is telling the Palestinian citizen of Israel how she is experiencing the reality under which she lives. It's a staggering moment.
I find it staggering that he's stating facts that contradict how she feels about the reality. This isn't about feelings. This is about facts. And all the facts that he stated are correct. But we haven't gotten to Benny Morris yet.
For me. Now, there were different strands to Zionism, okay? There was a cultural Zionism, there was a binational Zionism. This could have gone in different directions. From the perspective of 2024, 75 plus years in, the idea that this is just something benign doesn't match with the reality that has been lived. Now, I would say it's clear what this has meant for Palestinians, but I would argue it's not doing what was written on the tin for Jews either. I don't think either Israeli Jewish or global Jewish safety is best served by the actions we see day in, day out in Gaza.
Would you like to respond to what you've heard from the panel?
Please. I think there's a misunderstanding here. There is a separation between Israel and the West Bank, Israel and the occupied territory largely populated by the Palestinians, and the State of Israel. In Israel itself, there is a rule of law. There is generally equality between the Jews and the Arabs, and you're misrepresenting it when you say that they are persecuted, and he's damn right in what he says. All the Arab states are dictatorships which do not allow their citizens any freedom, and Israeli Arabs enjoy most of the rights. They may be discriminated against in certain things, but they may enjoy certain rights which Jews do not have. For instance, not serving 3 years, wasting 3 years in the army, for example. Israeli Arabs don't do that.
We don't want to do
No, it's fine.
Yes,
I'm pretty sure most Palestinians are
Yeah.
desperate to serve in the Israeli military right now.
I'm sure you're right.
Thank you for relieving us from
One should
some
be
do.
in pre-1967 Zionism in Israel. It was not a colonial enterprise. In the West Bank, there is a colonizing and colonial framework, which is even apartheid-like in its actual workings. But in pre-1967 Israel, that was not the case. And for the first 100 years or so of Zionism, it wasn't a colonial venture. It wasn't a venture of an extension
Benny.
of an imperial. Let me just define colonialism, since you're so busy defining genocide. Imperialism and colonialism were matched together, in which an empire sent its children to dominate and take over a third world country and exploit its riches
not
and
South
its
Africa.
people. This is
My
not what
father didn't
Israel
lose
did
his land.
until 1967.
Emmanuel, do you agree with Benny that there is a colonial aspect, an apartheid-like aspect to the occupied West Bank?
No. Zionism is a national liberation movement that freed its land from Arab Muslim colonialism. How do you think Islam expanded itself from the Arab Peninsula to Indonesia, from Indonesia to Morocco? Not from the Holy Spirit. This was conquest and colonialism.
This is exactly the problem, is that he's a racist. He espouses these racist views. That's the problem with Israel.
Racist views. He just stated a fact again. Before, the fact that Arabs have equal rights in Israel. Now the fact that Arabs and Muslims conquered all that territory. What does that have to do with racism? It's an historical fact.
Israel is a society, a country that is based on this idea of Jewish supremacy, and anything that they do or say goes, which means, therefore, that as a Palestinian who lives in that country, who is not enjoying any benefits of so-called democracy, that they get to espouse and tell me how I feel. They get to make statements like we are a fifth column, and they actually treat Palestinians as though they are a fifth column. It's very important, Mehdi, for people to understand that Israel came to us. We didn't immigrate to Israel. Israel's a colonial movement, and as a colonial movement, its aim is to not only get rid of Palestinians, but it's to transform the entire place, to erase and replace.
Okay, Emmanuel, I want to ask you this. Do you recognize the shifts that Benny was agreeing on at the start of this segment about what's happening inside of Israeli society?
Well, allow me to respond to what Diana just said. She's not telling the truth. What she's saying is not true. First of all, the Jewish country, I mean, there are over 190 states in the world. Most of them are nation states. It's not about supremacy. It is about national self-determination and freedom. Now, we didn't come to you. This is our land.
No, it's not.
This is a Jewish land.
The way that the state was created was
our
through
land.
the
And
ethnic
first of all, when you
cleansing
we came to you, it's not. I did not
including
interrupt
my
you.
family.
Diana, let him finish his point, Diana.
Okay. First of all, when you say we've been there for hundreds of years, the word Palestine, it's an invention of British colonialism. It was invented in 1920. It did not exist under the Ottoman Empire.
Again, not
so
for denial.
when this story starts, it's a colonial invention. So when you say Palestine, and you can't even pronounce it in Arabic because there's no P in Arabic, that's why we say Philistine, right?
There's no J in Hebrew.
All right. We did not conquer.
All right, Emmanuel.
It's really hard because it's always the case that someone just comes and just lays out all these lies. Israel's an apartheid state. Israel's a colonial movement. We're persecuted. And these things aren't true. And that lady also, she is saying basically about how I feel. You can't tell me how I feel. You're right. I can't tell you how you feel, but I can tell you a fact, which is only in Israel can you vote, have representatives, speak your mind, have freedom of speech, and you have access to the best universities and healthcare in the entire region, equal access, where actually a majority of the doctors and nurses are actually Arab. Those are facts. Now, you can feel discriminated against. You can feel like this and that is happening in Israel, but as a citizen of Israel, you have all those things. Benny Morris talked a little bit about the distinction between what's going on in the West Bank and inside Israel proper. That's for another discussion. He has some grain of truth in what he's saying, although not to the extent that he's claiming, in the sense that there's a big difference in the status of Arabs inside Israel who are citizens and those who are in the West Bank regarding the freedoms that they have, and we can try to unpack that in another video. But, well, Al Jazeera panel led by Mehdi Hassan. I would never even go on such a panel with that kind of audience. Like, I wouldn't waste my time with those people. I think it's Al Jazeera run by Mehdi Hassan. There's no point. There's no point. But in the end of the day, it's just, I lie, and this is the truth, and people clap their hands, and it's not the truth. So that's all I can say about that. Benny Morris, you really should read his books, particularly about 48. They're very in-depth. He's like the original scholar who uncovered a lot of the information. He gives a good, balanced view of a lot of the things that happened. He's not shy of criticizing Israel for things that they might have done wrong during that conflict. But his overall assessment is, which I think is correct, is that Israel was assaulted on all sides by the Arab states, and the main goal was to protect the state and make sure it's not destroyed by the hostile enemies, not to go on some vengeance-ranging expulsion of Arabs, as people like Diana Boudou and other pro-Palestinians claim.